Even though I had made a performance modification to the Nissan NS70B by putting stickers on it to make it faster, we had an electrical problem. It ran fine, actually it ran 50 miles, and then the next day it wouldn't start. That led me to believe that we had an electrical problem somewhere. I was able to find a service manual on eBay, so I bought that, and then I looked up the values that the different components were supposed to be outputting and checked them with a multimeter, and I found out that the exciter/stator was not producing a spark. The way that the electrical system works is basically the flywheel spins around magnets, which generates alternating current, or AC, like in your house. This current passes through a voltage rectifier, which changes it to DC, or direct current, like in a battery. This current is then routed to the capacitor discharge ignition, or CDI, which tells the ignition coils to fire the spark plugs. Some of this current is also sent back to charge the battery. Here you can see the different components of the electrical system: the spark plugs, the ignition coils, part of the stator. Those are the exciter and pulsar coils, and the windings are inside underneath the flywheel. The little box with fins is the rectifier, and the larger box that's sealed in epoxy is the CDI, or capacitor discharge ignition. First we have to remove the flywheel. We use a flywheel puller to pull the flywheel off. Makes things a lot easier. Once we pulled the flywheel off, we saw immediately what one of the problems was. The magnets are supposed to be glued to the inside of the flywheel. Once they're peeled off the top of the stator, they're going to have to be cleaned and then glued back in with epoxy in exactly the right location, and also making sure that the north and south poles alternate in order to produce electrical current. Here we've got everything pulled out of the flywheel and the magnets are cleaned up. I still have to polish the inside of the flywheel, but you see the keyway there, which keeps everything aligned to make sure that everything fires in the correct order. Here I'm using a wire wheel just to try to get some of the rust and corrosion out of there, and then I wiped it out with acetone to get it nice and clean in preparation for the epoxy. I did some research, and this appeared to be the best thing to glue magnets to a flywheel. The important thing was to make sure that the surface was really clean. This particular tip also kind of mixes the catalyst and the epoxy together as it's being dispensed, and then I just smoothed it on the magnets and put everything in place. It doesn't really matter where the magnets are because they're going to be generating alternating current, but they all do need to be equidistant from each other. So I used a little screwdriver to get everything spaced out evenly, and then make sure, of course, that the north and the south poles alternate. I was incredibly fortunate to be able to find a brand new stator that was a new old stock, still in the bag, from 1992, and I was able to find that on a Facebook group for Tohatsu/Nissan outboard engines. These two wound coils are the parts that generate the alternating current when the magnets go around them, and I think where they failed was the thin gauge wire is only insulated with varnish, and over time this overheated and ended up shorting out. But this new one is in great shape and all new wiring. If you're interested, this is the part number for the pre-1992 engine. Here you can see the old assembly still attached on a rotating ring, which actually moves forward and increases the timing, or advances the timing, as the engine speeds up. This is to keep in sync with the piston moving faster. Once I remove the 3 screws, the old assembly just pulls right off, and then I just bolt the new one right back on. Here's a shot of the linkage that moves the ignition advance forward as the throttle increases. Next, all the color-coded wiring gets connected. Make sure that you keep all the wires together the correct way, because if you don't, the engine will start but won't turn off. Ask me how I know. Once all the wires are connected, the next thing to do is put the flywheel back on and tighten it to the specified torque. Once the flywheel is torqued down and seated, move it back and forth to make sure that it turns freely. Once all that's done is the moment of truth. Turn the battery power back on and see if it starts.